Hello, hello. Let's make the chest piece for this bespoke jacket I'm working on. Now, I've already fitted this client with a calico. Of course, that is only one method of doing it. There's 100 others, but I've already gone through that process, so I'm not going to be too precious about how many changes we can make here, because I've already fitted the calico, adjusted the pattern, and then cut this from there. But you can see on this pattern, it's a little bit extra than the pattern itself. So I first cut that out, soaked it a little bit just for that last shrink. I always soak it when I buy it immediately. And then I soak it again for that last shrink after I've cut it. And now I'm going to get this ready for actually working. So this pattern of mine has no seam allowance. So this edge is exactly the edge of the garment that we're going to see. So like I said, I'm not too precious about the edges. I'm going to leave that for now. I'll trim it down as I work the horsehair onto the garment, but I am going to bring it down maybe right here. I am going to mark a few things, and that's what we're here for. So I'm going to mark here the gorge of my neck and my break line, and I'm going to mark my shoulder. And my armhole. All right, there it is. So break line, there it is. This is actually more or less neatly folded. It's my break line. So I do enjoy doing the calico fitting. It reduces my anxiety quite a bit, and also sometimes gives me an opportunity to find the correct fabric for a client, and still then do that fitting process, and then during that first fitting show them the fabric. Okay, let's see. So this dot here, let's just move this to be front and center. This dot here, I'm going to go just to the biggest portion of the dot. I'm not going to come all the way down to here where the pocket's going. It's going to go here to the center of the dot, and I'm just going to mark that through here. You know, with this, what is this? The cork. You can just lift the pattern off like that. So there's my dart. I'm just going to mark the dart. Forgot I need to mark also center front. Okay, and there's my cut in, a little bit above the pocket, that one. So let's just line this back up. Right, and I want to mark the center front. So again, I can just want to mark these buttons. Not that it's really going to matter, but it's going to help me to match it into the garment. So I'm marking that. I'm going to do this with a pencil so that it's really not going to erase through the process. And just marking it up. All right, so we've got buttons, dart, armhole, shoulder, break line. And that is that. So I'm actually going to transfer these marks onto all four sides, onto this side, and then also onto these sides. And I'm going to use tracing paper for that. It's just the fastest and easiest. I won't take you through all of that. What I'm going to do now is now this is not 100% horsehair. It's coming this way. This is always in conversation with the client to hear what kind of structure they want. Do they want it more soft? Do they want it more thick? What's going to work for them. And you'll see the grain line of this full canvas that goes all the way. This is the very soft one. The grain line is going perpendicular to or let's say the horsehair is going perpendicular to the grain line, so that it's stiff in this direction, but very soft in this direction. Everyone has a bit of a different tendency here with the chest piece. Let me just see how I'm going to do this. So I like to do the horsehair perpendicular to the break line. There's a number of reasons for that. One, it makes this portion sort of bouncy in a very interesting way. So it's not so stiff by having the two grains match up. So it is, it's still stiff here, but also more flexible than had we had these grain lines exact. Now I'm talking too much. I'm not actually focusing on what I'm doing. I'm going to have to do it like this. And the other reason is that because this is now running along with the grain line, just have it a little bit over the chest there. That's going to be fine. There's my grain line, my break line. It's going to help stabilize this break line. So obviously I am going to put a bridle there to make sure that it doesn't relax too much, because of this is now going to be on the bias. But this horsehair then does actually help with a bit of that stiffness. So I'm going to just do the same here. Armhole, shoulder, neckline. And you see here, this is extending over the break line. This is because during the fitting, we might want to shift this break line, and then I want to have enough to do that. But after that, it's going to be trimmed back beyond underneath the break line. And also it won't be so far down as to touch this first button. And then here, it's only going to come to about halfway down the dart. It's not going to go all the way into the waist. So again, with this one, same story. I'm going to transfer these marks to all four sides, onto this side and then both sides. There you have it. I've transferred the marks onto all four sides. I did forget, like an insane person, to mark the dart here on the chest piece. So make sure you do that and make sure you're not insane. From there, I'm going to mark out the puff. And this I'm going to mark on the chest piece only for now. So let's see, lining these up, making sure everything is more or less aligned. Chest pieces, lining them up. So I'm a big fan of the puff. I think it's really helps to let the chest piece line nicely where it's supposed to be. I don't know if you can see on the camera. Here is my shoulder. So how I do the puff is that I come in the middle of the shoulder. Let's call it 16, so half would be 8. And I come straight down, going with the grain line. Now this, I've seen as a bit of a heretical thing to do, but I follow this chap called Reza. Check him out. It's called the International School of Tailoring. And I really just like the logic that he has behind putting it at an angle to the shoulder rather than straight down like here. So here I'm going to do 10 centimeters. I don't like it to be much further than the gorge of the neck here. So 10 centimeters is going to be fine. What I'm going to do is shift this slightly backwards so that on the canvas portion it actually moves this further back towards the shoulder, and then I only have to cut once so that these lines are not going to wind up on top of each other. I'm going to put that out the way for a second, bring back some scraps that I saved while I was cutting, and let's see, I'm going to then draw. We need 10 centimeters plus, whatever extra is there, but I'm going to mark that 10 on the shoulder line. And one of the few times that I'll be using a curve, so I'm going to open my puff 2 centimeters, and I've got this marked out of my curve where I like to draw it. Also, I follow Reza with this and using a curve rather than a straight. If you want to check out his logic around it, he has really great videos, very comprehensive study on bespoke tailoring. So again, 10 centimeters. And we need to make sure that this is a mirror image. I'll do that on the portion for the canvas as well. I think the really important thing to say is not to use this in the wrong direction. We can't draw it like this because that's just too soft. It's not actually going to create the puff. You have to draw it in this direction so that that is going to create the strength of the puff, and open this up, and that's then going to fit nicely on, you see there's your shoulder bone there. Going to fit nicely there and curve in to the shoulder over there. So I'm going to draw. Okay, I cut all my pieces. Now I'm going to, as you know how much I love to pin. So the most important thing is that this is going to be mirror images. So I want the straight portion to be towards the neck, and I'm matching up the bottom with the bottom of my cut, and I'm just pinning a little bit there. So I just pin the one side. What I'm going to do is zigzag along here, and then this I'll move and just zigzag as I go. And you see that curve really gives us a nice beautiful curve here for the shoulder bone there. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm just going to pin and then stitch that as I go, and this must just be a mirror image. So the straight portion towards the neck, curved portion towards the shoulder or towards the arm. I just pin the one side, and how I'm going to do, I'm going to zigzag, a zigzag kind of a safe distance from the edge, I zigzag around. Then I come back and I zigzag over this edge so that these two layers are really, really tight. I come this side, I trim down the excess, and then there where I've trimmed, I zigzag over that edge as well. Just because I'm extra, but it gives me a nice secure portion. And I'll come show you that stitching is good. I just stitch once here, once over the edge, trim the back, and then stitch over the edge. Here, I also take the opportunity to use some old threads that are a little bit too brittle to really use in a garment, because here there's a lot of stem stitch teeth, so stitch density, so that you don't have to stress too much if the cotton is a bit brittle. And you'll see this portion where the puff is at the back is what's going to go onto the fabric. So here I'll just put a strip of fusing over those stitches, just so that it's not going to shine through onto the garment. Just going to do like that, like that. Then the other thing, when you iron, of course, you don't want to now iron this flat and undo all the work you've done. So you'll see you can iron that portion flat, and then this bubble you can just shift that way, iron that portion flat. Putting the fusing on, so you don't have to do it on the chest piece because the chest piece is towards the body. Here you can see I've just fused the stitches closed. I'm just a bit anxious sometimes that the stitches will now show up on the fabric. So wherever I put a stitch, I just fuse it closed. Here I'm going to cut a piece of domett. This is a very loosely woven wool, which I have really struggled to find in South Africa. I haven't found it at all. This is my last piece that I got from Germany. And you know, you can also use maybe a felt will also work. Anything that's, you know, a nice loose weave that's going to move and easy to stretch, because you now have to stretch it over this portion here. So usually the domett I'll cut a little bit bigger, but actually now here on the break line, here we are going to cut a little bit bigger because it must cover this horsehair. Because it is to make it more soft on the body, because it's going to go between the body and the horsehair. Now this horsehair is quite soft, it doesn't have those prickly bits, so not too much of a drama. But you know, it's still going to feel nice and luxury. But you can really use anything that's, like I say, soft and malleable, and try to get it on the bias, because then you'll be able to shift or, you know, stretch out this portion where we put the puff in. At the end of the day, you just need some layer between the horsehair and the body. And if you are going to use felt, it's a bit more stiff, so you lose the softness of the horsehair. So you always got to gamble. You know, here, this extra portion is actually just for anxiety if we do need to change the break line for the client. Now this chap, it's a 3-button, and there's really not a chance that we're going to bring it higher up. If you want to move the break line higher up, then you are going to need this extra portion. So that's why we have this extra portion there. So this chap, you know, there's a chance we'll move it lower down, very small chance. So I'm actually going to cut this out and bring it back. So usually you have this about 1 centimeter back from the break line, because you don't want this to be kind of interfering with your break line, pushing your break line out of whack. You want it to be back from the break line, and you don't want it to be at this front button or this top button. So I'm just going to trim that down. Of course, if the break line comes down, the button will move, etc. But like this, that's okay. That's going to be fine. Matching up just break line and making sure that my dart is matching. And then here, I'm just going to quickly pop to the iron and give, oh, I'm not even going to, I'm just going to give it a stretch with my hands, just as we did the puff, so that it's going to be a bit easier to place here. So this is going to come almost to the break line. Let's see. No, I wanted to cover my horsehair here at the bottom. So here at the top, it should come to the neckline. This is coming a little bit short. Don't judge me. Right, here we go. So I'm going to just, no, I don't even have to, I'm just going to grab a pin or two, pin this out. Sometimes I'll do this with a base, but it's not really necessary. Just need a few pins to keep me together. In this bubble, I'm going to shift to this side, see, like so. So this portion is now flat. And then here with pinning. Alright, so like I say, the whole reason we cut this extra is for if there's adjustments. Now, this client, we're not really going to adjust. So here's the shoulder, and of course I've moved the shoulder because of this puff. See here, I've moved the shoulder because of this puff. So, you know, this is even off the shoulder already. So I'm just going to cut this one time around like so. You know, this gives me enough extra that I can shift it around, but not so much that I'm going to waste an extra half an hour pad stitching something that I'm not going to use. Here at the top, so this portion is touching the garment, and we really want whatever's touching the garment to be one layer. I'm going to trim this so that it's, there we go, just one layer like that. So here I'm just going to trim this down a little bit. So I'm a little bit, as you see, a little bit of a cowboy with all of this. I kind of cut whatever shape is suggested to me by the fabric itself, because I don't like to create more waste than I need to. You know, and as long as this is now covering the horsehair there, that's totally fine. Here I think it's totally fine that it doesn't come all the way to the neckline, that's why I'm not too fussed about it. Because this is quite a you know, sensitive area right here by the neck, so we don't want so many layers up here. If this was a real horsehair, I'd have trimmed that down so that you don't have this stabbing into your neck. But because it's not actually, I'm really not fussed about that. So I'm going to do the same on the other one. So again here, I'm going to use my spare spools. What happened here, a client donated to me a whole bunch of these threads that were his grandmother's, and they're quite brittle. Not quite brittle, they're too brittle to really be used in the garment construction. You see it like just covered in dust. So we sorted out the ones that we could use and the ones that I just felt were a bit too brittle. And these brittle ones we use in other projects, such as here. You know, for this hand stitching, it's not a real problem because there's stitch density, and they don't really hold a portion of the garment together. You know, there's no real tension on the seams with this. So here, everyone has a bit of their own method, and I don't really, even myself, have a consistent method. Some people start in the center and then go left and right. Today, I'm just going to go parallel to the, I'm just going to go parallel to the break line and go that way. Other people separate out this shoulder portion and do this one up and down and that one horizontally. I really don't think there's much of a drama. I'm actually changing my mind. I'm going to do this one where I go straight up and down from the here by the dot, and then I go left and right. So here I'm going to go 3 stitches in one spot because we don't really want knots here. We want this to be nice and smooth. And I'm going to go straight up. Now, the smaller and closer together the stitches are, the more stiff your chest piece is going to be. So you can always gauge, you know, with the client what kind of garment they're looking for, and then between all the layers of the horsehair, the type of horsehair you're using, and the size of the stitches you're doing, you'll be able to get a garment that is to the satisfaction of the client, either nice and rigid and structured, or nice and soft, somewhere in between. You know, this is what I really love about Bespoke. Each one is going to be a little bit unique. So nothing really to it. I'm just going right to left, all the way up. the way. So if this was now, if I was anxious that I would need to move the break line, I wouldn't come all the way to the break line. I'd leave maybe 2 centimeters. For this client, we've already gone through a based fitting. We might move the break line a little bit down, but I highly doubt it. So I think I'm going to risk it and just go, I'll stick a little bit back from the break line. Let me just draw it in, otherwise you can see my brain, so many things going on. So I'm going to stick 2 centimeters back from the break line. And so here coming down, we're going to do the same thing, right to left. What's important here is to be in the middle of the original stitch, or the stitch that's next door. If you line all your stitches up, it creates a bit of a wave. So you want to break that by being in the middle of the stitch that's next door. No one will really die if you do not form this V pattern, this fishbone pattern, but it is tradition to do this V-shape herringbone pattern. So it's also a good way for you to demonstrate what level of skill you're on. Can you handle going right to left consistently, or is that the challenge for you? So here we are at the bottom. I don't have to stress too much. I'm just going to pop over to the next line and just keep coming back. And again, just in the middle of the previous stitch. Ooh. Just going to continue doing that, up and down, up and down. You'll see this portion, easy peasy. Here, we're going to have this bubble going on here. So I'm going to go straight to there. Then I'm going to shift that bubble this side. I can even put a pin there if I want. And you see that flattens that out. And then continue that way. Here at the edge, it's really up to you if you want to start curving or you just want to keep straight. Doesn't really matter, as long as these 2 layers or 3 layers all get stitched together. Something else I'll just say quickly, for myself, I don't really do this, but you can, here on the shoulder, flatten that out and have an extra portion there for a strong shoulder. And you can, here, have another layer of horsehair, keeping the armhole stiff. Or, something like that. I don't know. Whatever's going to float your boat. I don't. This is how I do my chest piece. And there we have it. Chest piece is done, pad stitched all the way. Here, leaving a little bit in case we're going to move this break line downwards. If it was the case that I thought we might move it upwards, the horsehair would have just been a little bit over the break line. Here I did a herringbone stitch around the edges. Don't really need to, but just makes me feel better. Gave this a bit of an iron, and of course I ironed that flat like so, and I shifted that bubble, ironed that flat like so. So this is now going to be the stiffness of our chest piece. It's nice and smooth, but it's still going to give us that nice hectic or stiff look without being like a brick. So from there, I'm going to lay these 2 together. Check that my marks are the same. Let's just move this one a little bit. So I want to put now the dot on there we go. This chest dot. And then I'm also going to put a small dart here in the armhole. It's just going to help it to lie closer to the body. This one, I'm afraid I'm a bit of a cowboy here. I know that my front panel is ending there. So I go 2 to 3 fingers above, not more than that. I'm going to do 3 fingers. And at the end of the day, it needs to, in a way, curve neatly into this dart here. So this dart I fitted with the client, and this in total it's 1.5 centimeters, yes. So 3/4 each side. Now this is the biggest part of my dart. From there it goes straight down. So here there's no, how can I say, no other shape to the dart. It's just it's just straight. So I'm just going to draw that in. Just move these pins out the way. So there is my 1.5 centimeter dart. I'm going to cut it along this line, and my pocket's going to be down here. Then this one on the arm side, plus minus 6 centimeters. Plus minus, no, 1 centimeter wide. I'm not going to go more than 1 centimeter wide. For a bodybuilder, maybe to 1.5. But here, I'm only going to do 6 centimeters. And this, I'm just going to curve in with my eyes, like so. That's it. So here, I like to cut this together. Let me just see I've got my armholes right. I like to cut this together so that they can be exact. I like things that are exact. So from here, I'm going to again be stitching it very similar to how I stitched the puff up here. What I want to do is have this portion here that's against the fabric to be as smooth as possible. So I'm going to put a piece of fabric at the back of this, not on top. And then I'm just going to stitch that together. There we go. The fabric you use, it can really be anything. I just randomly picked this out of the excess bag. And I just want to make sure that this will, that's going to be fine, cover nicely. Obviously, I'm going to trim that as I go. So I'm going to put this piece of fabric at the back. And then I'm just going to stitch that together. I'm going to make sure this really comes together. I don't want to see any gap there because, you know, a small gap is going to mean that one, there's a little bump there. And two, I'm not getting my measurements correct because this must really mirror the suit jacket. Then this one, same story. One thing here, you'll notice when this comes together, it's not going to match up here because it's a curve. So don't force it. Start at the point of the dart and then just come and let it just fall where it wants to fall. Don't force it to match here. This one, however, must match. So if you get to the bottom and you see there's a mismatch, start unpicking. I'm just going to do that quickly. And then I'll put, obviously, same as here, some fusing over there. Here we have it. We've got our chest dart, arm dart, and the puff on the shoulder. You can see with these, I stitched it down the center, getting those two edges together, stitched the sides, flipped it over to the side, trimmed that down, and stitched around that. So it's a lot of stitching here, gives us a lot of strength. And this portion is going to be on the fabric. It's just closed with a fusing. So not everyone does this chest dart or this puff up at the top here, but this chest dart and a chest dart, non-negotiable, that you absolutely have to do. So now once I've done all of that, you'll see here, of course, as we take this dart out here, it creates this overlap here. So you also have that on the pattern where you're going to be removing, it's usually about 3/4 centimeters. If we're doing, usually half of this ends up over here. So what I'm going to do there is some people just leave that open. I can't really deal with this flapping about. It just drives me crazy. You don't want to really close it solidly because the pocket is here. And every time you put your hand in your pocket, you're going to be putting a bit of tension here, which eventually can kind of warp this portion. So you want there to be a little bit of movement there, but not too much. It's a bit of a balance. So I'm just going to go with a single cotton and just do a herringbone over that, because the herringbone, of course, has a little bit of movement, but it's just going to keep that from flapping about and driving me crazy. So nothing too exciting. I'm just going to do a herringbone there. I am going to do it also on the other side. This I just kind of laid, as long as that's more or less 3/4, because like I say, this is stretchy, so it's not going to stress me out if it's a little bit skew, as long as it is closed. And I also like to close it in this direction, not the opposite direction. Let's say not like this, because then I feel that's going to flap down against the fabric, which won't be a great idea. So I'm just going to then not really knot off. Just going to go twice in one place, pass back, and then do the herringbone over on this side, just because I'm extra like that. After that, the last thing to be done is going to be to trim off this bit of excess there. Obviously, you could have arranged for that in your pattern, but it's very uncommon to do that. Usually, you're just going to trim it down once you're done. So this is not the final. This is just for the second fitting, to make sure we've got absolutely everything in place before I carry on from there. Obviously not. So then I'm just going to trim this down, and there is the chest piece. Good dealer. Fashion baby.